It started with something small. A flicker of movement in my rearview mirror. A shadow, just for a second, shifting in the back seat. I dismissed it as exhaustion. It was nearly 2 a.m., and I had been driving for hours, the long stretch of highway dissolving into the monotony of darkness and dimly lit road signs. The air outside was thick with mist, clinging to the asphalt like ghostly fingers. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. My phone had lost signal an hour ago, leaving me alone with nothing but the hum of my engine and the static-laden crackle of an old radio station. Every so often, a song would begin, only to distort and dissolve into an eerie silence. It felt as if the world outside my car had shrunk, leaving me in some liminal, inescapable space. Then, it happened again. This time, I was sure I saw it. A shape, too indistinct to define but undeniably present, lurking in the back seat. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I snapped my head back, my breath caught in my throat, but the seat was empty. Just a pile of clothes in my backpack, exactly as I had left them. A chill seeped into my bones, despite the heater blowing warm air. I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "You're losing it," I muttered to myself. I focused on the road, the white lines flickering under my headlights in an endless rhythm. But then, the rearview mirror shifted. Not much, just a fraction of an inch, as if something had brushed against it. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling on the wheel. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. But, something was wrong. The back seat wasn't empty anymore. I slammed the brakes, my car skidding to a stop in the middle of the desolate road. My breath came in ragged gasps as I turned fully, ready to confront whatever was there. But again, nothing. The seat was just as it had been before. The silence was thick, pressing against my eardrums like a held breath. My own breathing sounded too loud, too sharp. And then I realized it, the radio had stopped completely. No static. No music. Just an unnatural, suffocating stillness. I had to get out of here. I threw the car into drive and pressed my foot to the gas. The tires screeched as I surged forward, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The road stretched on endlessly, swallowed by the fog. My headlights barely pierced through the gloom, illuminating only a few feet ahead. Then the whisper came. A voice. Soft. Almost affectionate. "Why are you running?" Every hair on my body stood on end. It had come from inside the car. I refused to look in the mirror. I couldn't. I just kept driving, faster and faster, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The voice didn't speak again, but I felt it. Felt the presence shifting behind me, pressing against the back of my seat. Close enough that I should have been able to see it in my peripheral vision. But there was nothing. Then, my headlights caught something up ahead. A figure standing in the middle of the road. A person. Their clothes were tattered, skin too pale, face obscured by the fog. My instinct screamed at me to swerve, but as I gripped the wheel, paralyzed with indecision, the figure did something that made my blood run cold. They raised a hand and waved. Not a warning. Not a plea for help. A slow, deliberate wave. Like they knew me. I veered off the road, tires crunching over gravel, barely managing to stop before plunging into a ditch. My breathing was shallow, my hands shaking. When I looked up, the figure was gone. The radio crackled back to life. A soft, distorted chuckle slithered through the speakers. "Almost home," it whispered. And then, in the rearview mirror, I saw it. Not a shadow. Not a trick of exhaustion. A face. Grinning. Inches behind mine. I never made it home that night. At least, not as myself. But the car kept going. The next morning, it was found idling by the side of the road, the driver's seat empty, the engine humming softly. And the radio still playing, a voice whispering my name. It began with an odd sensation, like being watched. The kind that creeps up your spine and lingers at the edges of your thoughts. I ignored it at first. It was late, past 2 a.m., and the highway stretched endlessly ahead, cutting through the desolate countryside. The moon hung low, casting pale light over the mist that pooled on the asphalt. I was the only car on the road, or so I thought. The first sign that something was wrong came when the GPS glitched. The smooth voice guiding me home stuttered, warped, then cut out entirely. The screen flickered before going black. A minor annoyance, I told myself. I knew the route well enough. Then, the headlights of a car appeared in my rearview mirror. It came out of nowhere, too close, its beams glaring into my cabin. I blinked, startled. Where had it come from? There hadn't been another vehicle for miles. The car didn't overtake me. It just followed, its presence unnerving. I sped up slightly, but it matched my pace. Minutes passed. Then, something changed. The high beams flickered. Once. Twice. Then off entirely. The road plunged into darkness behind me. My stomach twisted as I glanced in the mirror. The car was gone. A chill crawled up my arms. There was no turnoff, no place it could have disappeared. I swallowed hard, forcing a nervous chuckle. Exhaustion was playing tricks on me. That's all it was. But then the radio crackled. At first, just static. Then, a voice, faint and distorted, "Don't look back." My blood ran cold. The voice was barely above a whisper, but it was clear, deliberate. My breath hitched. I turned the dial, trying to silence it, but the voice remained. Louder now. "Don't look back. Don't look back." My hands were slick on the wheel. Against every instinct, I stole a glance in the mirror. Something sat in my back seat. Not a person. Not exactly. A shape, its outline shifting as though struggling to exist. Its head tilted, bones cracking. A grin, too wide, split across its face. My reflection stared back at me, eyes frozen in terror, but the thing in the back seat wasn't in my reflection. I slammed the brakes. The tires screeched. My body lurched forward. But when I turned to face the back seat, it was empty. Just my jacket and an old coffee cup. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I gasped for breath, gripping the wheel like a lifeline. The road was still empty. The headlights illuminated nothing but the fog rolling across the asphalt. Then, a knock. A soft, deliberate knock on the driver's side window. My body locked up. I hadn't seen anyone outside. My fingers trembled as I turned my head. There was no one there. The radio crackled again. The voice, amused this time. "You shouldn't have looked." And then, the car door lock clicked open. The last thing I saw in the mirror was my own face, only it wasn't mine anymore. It grinned at me as the door swung wide. By the time the car was found the next morning, the driver's seat was empty. The engine idled, the door ajar. The only clue left behind was a smudged handprint on the fogged-up window. And the radio still playing, whispering someone else's name. The only clue left behind was a smudged handprint on the fogged-up window. And the radio still playing, whispering someone else. It started with a wrong turn. I had been driving for hours, trying to make it home after a late shift. The highway was supposed to be straightforward, but somewhere along the way, I must have missed an exit. The road I was on was narrow, surrounded by dense forest on both sides, the trees looming like silent watchers. My phone had lost signal an hour ago, and my GPS had frozen on a map that didn't match my surroundings. Frustrated, I scanned the area for a sign, a landmark, anything familiar. That's when I saw it. A gas station, its flickering neon sign barely holding on to life. It was the first sign of civilization I had seen in miles. Relieved, I pulled in, the tires crunching over gravel. The place looked abandoned. The windows were dark, and the only sign of movement was the moths swarming the lone, buzzing street lamp. Still, I figured there might be a payphone or someone who could give me directions. I stepped out, the night air thick and humid, carrying the scent of damp earth and gasoline. As I approached the station, I noticed something strange, an old sedan parked beside one of the pumps. Its driver's door was wide open, and the nozzle hung from the tank, dripping fuel onto the ground. But there was no one inside. A shiver crawled up my spine. I turned toward the station's entrance and hesitated. A figure stood behind the glass door. I froze. It wasn't moving, just standing there, its face obscured by the grime on the glass. I took a step closer, squinting. "Hey! Do you work here?" My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. No response. Then, as if I had triggered something, the lights inside the station flickered on. The figure was gone. I stepped back, my heart hammering. Maybe it had been a trick of the shadows. Maybe exhaustion was messing with me. I just needed to get out of here. Turning quickly, I rushed back to my car and got in, locking the doors. As I gripped the steering wheel, my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The back seat wasn't empty. A pair of pale hands gripped the headrest behind me. I spun around, but the seat was empty. Just my jacket and a few receipts scattered across the cushion. A chill settled into my bones. I fumbled to start the engine, the radio suddenly crackling to life. Static at first, then a voice, distorted and low. "You shouldn't have stopped." The lights in the gas station flickered again, and in that brief moment of illumination, I saw them. Figures, standing in the woods just beyond the station. Dozens of them. Motionless. Watching. I slammed the car into drive and peeled out of the lot, gravel kicking up behind me. The station disappeared in my rearview mirror, swallowed by the night. My breath came in short gasps, my fingers locked around the wheel. The radio crackled again. This time, the voice was laughing. "You're going the wrong way." It was supposed to be a simple drive home. Just another late-night shift, just another empty road stretching into the dark. But something felt off that night. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The usual hum of distant traffic, the occasional rush of a passing car, it was gone. Just me, my headlights cutting through the blackness, and an unsettling quiet that pressed against my ears like cotton. Then came the detour. A construction sign forced me off the highway onto a side road I didn't recognize. My GPS recalculated, rerouting me down an unfamiliar path through dense, towering woods. The asphalt was cracked, the dividing lines faded, as if the road hadn't been used in years. I tried to ignore the unease curling in my gut. I just needed to follow the GPS 20 minutes and I'd be back on the main road. But then the time estimate started increasing. 20 minutes. 25. 30. I hadn't made any turns, hadn't slowed down, yet the arrival time kept ticking upward. My phone screen flickered, and the GPS voice stuttered before falling silent. A pit formed in my stomach. I glanced at the rearview mirror. There was a car behind me. No headlights, no engine noise, just the dark outline of a vehicle, barely visible under the moonlight. I hadn't passed any cars. I hadn't seen anyone on this road for miles. But there it was. My fingers tightened on the wheel. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it had been there all along, just driving with its lights off. A reckless driver. A prank. The road curved sharply, and for a moment, I lost sight of the car. Relief washed over me. But when I straightened out, it was there again. Closer. I pressed the gas, my heart hammering. The trees on either side blurred as I sped up, trying to put distance between myself and the silent vehicle. The road stretched endlessly ahead, no signs, no turns, just an unbroken path through the trees. Then my headlights flickered. The engine sputtered. Panic flared in my chest. The car lurched, the dashboard lights dimming as if something were sucking the power straight out of it. I slammed the gas pedal, but the car slowed. Not stalled, just dragged, like something was pulling it back. I checked the mirror again. The car behind me was gone. But something else was there. A shape, tall and thin, standing in the middle of the road. Too tall. Its arms were long, almost reaching the ground, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. It didn't move. Just stood there, watching. The car finally rolled to a stop. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone. No signal. The screen flickered, then died completely. The silence pressed in again. Then, a tap on the window. My breath caught. I turned my head slowly, dreading what I might see. Nothing. Just the darkness, thick and unyielding beyond the glass. Then another tap. This time, from the other side. I spun, my pulse roaring in my ears. Still nothing. The car's interior. Light flickered on. The passenger seat wasn't empty. A grin. Too wide. Eyes too black. The voice that came from its mouth was my own. You took the wrong turn. The last thing I saw was my own reflection in the rearview mirror, except it wasn't me anymore. The next morning, my car was found abandoned on that road. Engine still warm. Driver's seat empty. No footprints. No signs of struggle. Just the lingering sound of static on the car radio, whispering a name that wasn't mine. It started as an ordinary drive home. A long shift had drained me, and the road stretched endlessly under my headlights, disappearing into the midnight haze. The highway was deserted. No distant hum of engines, no glow of taillights ahead. Just me, the rhythmic clicking of the turn signal, and the occasional flicker of my dashboard lights. Then, I saw the detour sign. Bright orange, reflective letters read, road closed, detour. The highway ahead was blocked with barricades, so I followed the arrow pointing to an unfamiliar side road. My GPS lagged before reluctantly recalculating. The voice instructions stuttered before resuming in a slightly distorted tone. The road twisted through dense woods, the trees leaning in like silent spectators. The air inside my car felt thick, pressing against my skin like a damp cloth. My fingers curled tighter around the steering wheel as a whisper of unease slid up my spine. Then, the clock on my dashboard flickered. 12:45 a.m. Then it reset. 12 a.m. I frowned. My phone's clock still showed 12:45. Maybe a glitch. I tapped the screen, but the GPS froze completely. The arrival time suddenly increased. 30 minutes. 40. An hour. That made no sense. I hadn't changed direction. I hadn't slowed down. A notification popped up, no signal. My pulse quickened. I glanced at my rearview mirror. A car followed me. No headlights. No sound. Just a dark shape, its silhouette barely visible under the moonlight. My throat went dry. I hadn't seen another vehicle on this road. Had it been following me this whole time? I pressed the gas. The road remained eerily straight, an endless ribbon of cracked asphalt. The headlights carved through the thick mist beginning to rise from the pavement, curling around my car like grasping fingers. Then, the headlights flickered. The engine coughed. The car jerked. And everything went black. When the lights returned, I was no longer on the road. I was parked in front of an old gas station. It looked abandoned, yet the neon "open" sign buzzed faintly in the window. The single gas pump was rusted, half buried in the weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. I didn't remember stopping. I checked the clock. 12 a.m. Still. The silence was thick, as if the world held its breath. The air outside seemed wrong, like the night was waiting. I hesitated, then opened the door. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like old blood. My footsteps echoed as I approached the station. The glass door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sickly yellow glow over the shelves. They were stocked with products from another era, faded candy bars, glass soda bottles, brands I'd never heard of. A newspaper lay on the counter, the date unreadable under layers of dust. Then I saw the clerk. He stood behind the register, perfectly still. His face was obscured by the shadow cast by his cap, his hand resting on the counter. He didn't acknowledge me. Didn't move. I cleared my throat. Hey. Can you tell me where this road leads? I think I got lost. The clerk lifted his head slightly. His lips stretched into a grin that was too wide, his teeth too sharp. You've been here before. My skin crawled. No, He gestured toward the security monitor behind him. The grainy black and white footage showed the gas station's parking lot. And my car. Sitting there. 4 hours. I took a step back. That's impossible. I just got here. The clerk tilted his head. Did you? The screen flickered. The timestamp read, 12 a.m. Then, the camera angle shifted, now it showed the inside of my car. Something sat in the back seat. I spun around. The gas station door slammed shut. The lights flickered. Outside, my car sat waiting. The driver's seat empty. The back seat door slowly creaked open. And then, I saw myself step out. The other me turned, grinning with hollow eyes. The gas station lights went out. And the clock never moved past midnight.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for supporting this channel. It truly means a lot. As a broke college student editing all my videos on an Android phone, it takes a lot of effort to bring these stories to life. A laptop would help me create better content faster, so if you enjoy my work, please subscribe and share. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you so much.